Then stop pretending you don't want me. The words left Lumi's mouth quietly, but Julian's hidden microphone carried them through the service corridor wall and into a ballroom filled with 400 guests. He stood inches from her in a charcoal tuxedo, one hand still curled around the revised gala program she had pressed against his chest. Lumi's burgundy silk dress showed beneath her open black coat, its hem darkened by rain. Beyond the corridor turn, security waited to keep her out of the room where Julian was about to explain why the most valuable portrait in Vale and Rowe's centennial auction had been withdrawn. His gray-green eyes held hers. Lumi. She stepped closer. That isn't an answer. Julian gave her time to move away. When she didn't, he lowered his head. She kissed him. His breath caught against her mouth. Then the ballroom speakers carried several unmistakable seconds of silence. Neither of them knew the microphone was still on. 72 hours earlier, Lumi Hart had stood beneath the portrait and noticed a single red thread where no thread should have been. Cold rain pressed against the tall gallery windows of Vale and Rowe's Back Bay headquarters. Inside, staff moved through the private preview with the restrained urgency of people preparing to sell objects worth more than most buildings. The portrait dominated the far wall, a young woman in a dark green dress, painted against a luminous gray background, one hand resting on a carved chair. The Centennial catalog described it as the auction house's crowning lot, privately held since 1938 and expected to sell for more than $12 million. Lumi had been invited to examine the surface condition, not the ownership history. She crouched beside the frame in a cream blouse, dark trousers, and flat black boots still damp from the street. Her chestnut brown hair fell forward in loose waves as she aimed a small inspection light along the lower edge. The varnish was consistent with the documented treatment. The frame repairs looked plausible. The backing board did not. Its edges were too clean. The oxidation around the screws was uneven, and the fastening pattern disagreed with the condition report from 12 years earlier. "Miss Hart," the estate representative said behind her. "We need the lot returned to the main display." Lumi did not answer until she had finished studying the lower left corner. A screw had loosened enough to reveal a dark gap between the backing board and the frame. Inside that gap lay a narrow strand of faded red archival thread. Mara Levin, the claimant family's attorney, had shown her a wartime inventory photograph that morning. In the grainy image, the same portrait had been tagged with red cord and a handwritten family number before disappearing during the occupation. Lumi lifted her phone but did not touch the thread. "Mr. Grant," she said. Theo Grant, Vale and Rowe's chief registrar, crossed the gallery. "What do you need?" "Please photograph the room as it is. Everyone present, the position of the object, and the visible corner. No one touches the frame." The estate representative took a step forward. "You were hired for a condition review. The backing board may have been replaced without documentation. The fastening is unstable, and the exposed material may be historically significant. Or it may be thread. That is why I'm not identifying it as anything else." Across the room, Julian Vale had stopped speaking to a pair of trustees. He was tall and lean in a dark navy suit, his posture composed enough to make stillness seem authoritative. Lumi had watched him command the preview without once raising his voice. Now he approached and looked first at her, then at the exposed corner. "How recent?" he asked. "The board could be several years old. The cut edge is much newer than the catalogued repair date. I'd need the prior measurements and archive records." The representative's expression hardened. "The estate is withdrawing the portrait from inspection." Lumi rose. "Moving it before the fastening is documented could damage the object and compromise the condition record. You don't have authority to hold it." "No," she said. "But Vale and Rowe does." Everyone looked at Julian. For a moment, Lumi saw the cost of the decision move behind his eyes. The estate had consigned not only the portrait but nearly a third of the centennial sale. Julian turned to Theo. "Seal the gallery and open a temporary condition hold." The representative stared at him. "You understand what this will do to our relationship?" "I understand what an undocumented alteration could do to the painting." Theo began recording names and times. Staff closed the gallery doors. Julian waited until the others had moved away before addressing Lumi. "The visible clue will not survive a legal challenge by itself." "I know. You'll need archive corroboration. Then give me independent access." His gaze sharpened, as if he had expected gratitude rather than a demand. Lumi slipped her phone into her bag. "And put the terms in writing." The estate representative's objections continued in the registrar's office, where rain tapped against the narrow windows and the sealed portrait waited on the other side of the wall. "She exceeded the scope of a routine consultant," he said. Lumi stood at the end of the table, hands relaxed at her sides. "The condition protocol applies when an undocumented structural alteration may affect safe movement." He turned toward Theo. "Is that your interpretation?" Theo opened the object log. The catalog lists no replacement of the backing board after 1999. The current fasteners do not match the last authorized treatment photographs. The auction house controls that record. "That is why an independent mandate matters," Mara said. She sat beside Lumi with a legal pad and the calm of someone accustomed to making powerful people dislike precise sentences. Julian remained near the window. "The hold stands through tonight." "That is not enough," Mara replied. "The estate can argue tomorrow that Miss Hart acted as your agent to manufacture a restitution dispute." Julian looked at Lumi. "Continue the examination. I'll authorize whatever access you require." Lumi held his gaze. "Informally?" His mouth tightened. "I won't build a case that depends on your discretion," she continued. "My fee must be fixed. My report goes directly to claimant counsel and any independent panel Mara designates. I need termination rights and documented access to the archive." "You're asking to examine restricted family records." "I'm asking not to become dependent on the person whose family may be implicated." The room went quiet. Lumi had learned the cost of relying on private assurances years earlier, when a museum director used her research to challenge the attribution of a major painting. When donors complained, the museum removed her name from the findings while continuing to rely on her work. She had no intention of repeating the arrangement in a more elegant building. Julian studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Mara, draft it." The estate representative pushed back from the table. "If the portrait is not released by morning, the estate will reconsider every consignment." Julian opened the office door. "That is your right." After the man left, Julian looked through the glass toward the sealed gallery. "There's something you should know before you decide whether to continue," he said. The donor reception had begun in the public rooms by the time the agreement was ready. Staff directed Lumi around the building to the loading entrance, where wet crates, rolled carpets, and floral deliveries passed beneath harsh white lights. Through the glass doors at the front, she saw Julian and his aunt, Celia Vale, greeting donors beneath the bronze archway. Lumi noted the distinction and kept walking. In the upstairs conference room, Celia read the agreement with visible displeasure. At 62, she possessed Julian's controlled posture and none of his hesitation. "Public attribution cannot be guaranteed while the evidence remains unverified," she said. "Confidentiality is reasonable," Lumi replied. "Misrepresentation is not." Celia looked up. "Meaning?" "My role can remain undisclosed during the investigation. It cannot later be described as something smaller because the findings become inconvenient." Mara turned the document toward Celia. "That language is already included." Julian signed first. Lumi signed after verifying the fixed compensation, direct reporting rights, and independent termination clause. Theo issued 2 restricted archive cards, one to Lumi and one to Julian. Dual access only. Every entry and exit is logged. Celia left for the reception without offering her hand. Julian waited until the door closed. My mother was blamed for a disputed sale 15 years ago, he said. The public version was that she ignored a provenance warning. She died before the firm admitted its review had been inadequate. Lumi said nothing, allowing him to decide how far to continue. After my father died, I found references suggesting he had withheld records from her. The portrait downstairs may be connected to the same file. You think he let her take the blame? I think he believed the firm would collapse if the records surfaced. And what do you believe? Julian's expression barely shifted, but his hand tightened around the archive card. That truth is safer when the evidence is secured before anyone can weaponize it. That wasn't my question. No, he said. It wasn't. He crossed to the archive stairwell and held the security door open. I'm not asking you to protect my family name, Lumi. I'm asking whether you can examine the evidence without deciding in advance what it proves. She stepped past him. I can. Can you? The restricted archive occupied 2 climate-controlled rooms beneath the gallery. The air smelled faintly of paper, metal shelving, and old varnish. Friday morning, Lumi worked through repair cards, customs seals, frame dimensions, and shipping numbers. She wore a pale blue shirt with the sleeves buttoned at her wrists until she entered the conservation area. Julian sat across from her, tracing catalog changes through the digital system he had designed after taking control of the firm. He remembered object histories the way other people remembered faces. This customs number appears in the 1962 intake ledger, he said. Then disappears from the public file in 1968. Lumi compared the handwritten entry to the photograph Mara had supplied. The frame width matches within 3 millimeters. That is too close to dismiss. Julian pulled up the later catalog record. The description changes here. Central European Family Collection becomes private collection acquired before the war. No name. Who approved the revision? The approval field is blank. Blank digitally? He checked the original scan index. The paper file was excluded. Theo brought the corresponding archive box under dual sign-out. Inside, the folders jumped from 1967 to 1971. A staff photographer appeared at the doorway, documenting centennial preparations. Mr. Vale, one quick shot for the internal history page? Julian closed the archive box and moved 2 steps away from Lumi before the camera lifted. The action was smooth enough to appear accidental. Lumi noticed anyway. After the photographer left, she reopened the box. Does the camera damage the documents? Julian looked at her. You moved as if it did. The investigation is confidential. The open box was the confidential part. Standing beside me wasn't. His expression went still. Rumors create leverage. So does visible discomfort. He did not argue. Near noon, they found a reference in an estate inventory prepared after Julian's mother died. Private working ledger. Sealed by family instruction. Julian read the line twice. Where is it? Lumi asked. In my father's private archive. Can you bring it? Yes. Will you? He shut the inventory. I've never opened it. Lumi rested her fingertips on the edge of the table. Then bring it when you know why you're opening it. You don't want to tell me what the evidence requires? The evidence requires the ledger. You have to decide whether you want truth or relief. His eyes held hers. You make those sound very different. They often are. That night, the conservation laboratory reduced the portrait to materials, measurements, and light. Theo unlocked the storage mount, confirmed the object number, and left them under camera coverage. Lumi rolled her sleeves and pulled on nitrile gloves. Julian removed his jacket and tie but remained in his white shirt and dark trousers. "Support the lower rail," she said. 2 inches closer to the corner. He followed her instruction without trying to anticipate it. Lumi angled a lamp across the reverse edge. Fine abrasions appeared beneath the fastener heads. "The board has been lifted more than once," she said. "To inspect the canvas?" "Possibly. But the scratches run in opposing directions. Someone removed it, reattached it, then removed it again with a different tool." She shifted her grip. A cramp tightened across her right hand. Before she could speak, Julian adjusted the weight on his side, easing pressure from her fingers while keeping the unstable corner level. "Better?" he asked. "Yes." He did not look pleased with himself. He simply held the frame steady. That restraint affected her more than praise would have. They worked in silence for several minutes, close enough that she could see the faint shadow of fatigue beneath his eyes. His competence in the auction room had been polished and public. Here, he was willing to follow. Lumi measured the frame depth, backing board projection, and clearance required for transport. Theo returned to record the dimensions. Julian's phone vibrated on the steel table. He read the message. "Electrical inspection tomorrow morning. Secure storage will be opened for 90 minutes. Lumi removed her gloves. "Who requested access?" "Building management." The estate also asked for transport clearance during the same window. "For the portrait?" "For all withdrawn property." She looked at the frame. "Record the current crate dimensions tonight," she told Theo. "Interior depth, supports, humidity controls, every removable component." Theo nodded. Julian watched her. "You think they'll try to move it?" "I think an inspection creates confusion. Confusion creates opportunities." Outside, rain struck the basement window wells. Lumi placed the portrait back in storage herself, confirming the lower left corner remained untouched. The ledger had not arrived. By Saturday morning, the rain had thinned to a cold mist, but the secure storage corridor was crowded with electricians, movers, and temporary staff. Lumi arrived before 8 in the same dark trousers and practical boots. Julian was already there with Theo. 2 authorized movers rolled a transport crate toward the portrait storage bay. The estate representative followed them, holding a clearance form. "We are removing the withdrawn property," he said. "Your temporary condition hold has expired." "Not until the examination window closes," Theo replied. "The crate is approved." Lumi looked at it. The exterior dimensions were plausible. The interior supports were not. She crossed the corridor and asked one mover to open the side panel. He hesitated until Julian nodded. Lumi measured the usable depth. 32 millimeters short, she said. The representative folded his arms. "For what?" "For the portrait as documented last night. It fit its previous crate." "This is not its previous crate." Julian moved beside her. "Explain." Lumi faced Theo. "Read the recorded backing board projection." Theo opened the log. 48 millimeters from the rear plane of the frame. "And the interior clearance here is 16. One mover looked at the other. The representative said, "Remove the backing board." "No," Lumi replied. "It is a modern protective edition. It contains an exposed evidentiary surface, and removing it would disturb undocumented material." "You have no proof of that." "I have enough to prevent alteration." She did not raise her voice. She asked Theo for the conservation kit, then positioned a reversible numbered seal across the frame edge and backing board. The narrow strip passed directly beside the gap where the red thread remained visible. Julian held the inspection lamp while Lumi photographed the seal, thread, screw pattern, humidity display, crate interior, and serial number. "Send copies simultaneously to Mara, Theo, and me," she said. The representative stepped forward. "You are obstructing authorized property movement. I am documenting why the object cannot fit the authorized crate without physical alteration." She turned to Theo. "Record the names of both movers, the crate number, the person who requested it, the temporary access credential used to view the storage log, and the time." Theo began writing. Removing the portrait now would require breaking Lumi's numbered seal in front of multiple witnesses. Whatever had been intended, it could no longer happen invisibly. Julian looked at the fresh strip across the frame, then at Lumi. Until that moment, she thought, some part of him had still believed he could protect the evidence by controlling rooms and permissions. She had protected it by making interference visible. Mara answered the secure call on the second ring. By early afternoon, the registrar's office had become a legal command center. Theo produced the storage records. The temporary credential used to access the portrait log had been issued for the electrical inspection, but the system did not identify who had used it. The estate representative denied authorizing any alteration. Lumi limited her written account to what she could prove. The crate was too shallow, the portrait could not fit without disturbing the backing board, and the transport attempt occurred during an access window created by an unrelated inspection. "Do you believe they intended to substitute the board?" Mara asked. "I believe the dimensions required removal or substitution. Intent needs separate evidence." Julian leaned against the edge of the desk, watching her. Mara nodded. "That distinction helps. I'm filing for an emergency preservation order." 2 hours later, the court granted a short hold pending independent review. Theo exhaled for what seemed like the first time all day. "The portrait stays." "It stays sealed," Lumi corrected. When the others returned to storage, Julian followed her into the quiet stairwell outside the laboratory. "You could have accused the estate publicly this morning," he said. "And given them grounds to call the entire process reckless. You protected the firm. I protected the evidence. The firm benefits if it deserves to." A red line crossed the base of her right palm where she had held the frame steady while applying the seal. Julian noticed it. "May I?" She knew what he meant and extended her hand. He took her wrist lightly, examining the mark without turning the gesture into possession. His thumb hovered near her skin but did not stroke it. "Pressure only," she said. "It'll fade." His gaze lifted to hers. The stairwell seemed to narrow around the quiet contact. Lumi felt the change before either of them moved. Care had become awareness. Awareness was becoming desire. She withdrew her hand. Julian released it immediately. "I brought the ledger," he said. The sealed book waited that evening in the restricted reading room. It was smaller than Lumi expected, bound in faded blue cloth and wrapped in an old evidence sleeve. Julian placed it between them but did not sit. "My father sealed it after my mother died. You don't have to open it for me. The investigation needs it. The investigation needs evidence. Your reason for opening it still belongs to you." Julian looked through the glass wall into the dark archive. "I spent years believing I was preserving what she built," he said. "Then I began to suspect the institution survived by making her responsible for something my father did." Lumi kept her hands in her lap. "If the ledger confirms that," he continued, "I lose the version of him that made the rest bearable. Evidence cannot promise to be merciful. No. It can protect people who were denied the truth." His eyes returned to the book. Julian broke the family seal himself. The pages contained object descriptions in his mother's precise handwriting. She recorded frame widths, lining dates, old labels, customs marks, and questions no one had answered. Halfway through, Lumi saw the words "Red Inventory Cord." She leaned closer without touching the page. Julian read aloud. Portrait of young woman, gray ground. Carved frame, later gilding. Red inventory cord visible beneath lower backing edge. Family number removed from intake description. Below it, his mother had written, "Why does VV insist this remains outside the restitution file?" Julian's father's initials. Lumi opened Mara's wartime photograph on the secure monitor and placed it beside the ledger image. The red cord appeared in the same lower left position. Julian sat at last. She knew. She questioned it, Lumi said. "We still need the transaction file." She was blamed for ignoring a warning while he was excluding her questions. The grief in his voice was controlled, which made it harder to hear. Lumi understood the impulse to fill the silence for him. She refused to offer comfort that erased the work still required. "When my museum challenged an attribution," she said, "the conclusion came from my research. When donors threatened to leave, the director published the findings without my name." Julian looked at her. "They called it protecting a junior conservator," she continued. "They kept the evidence and removed the person who could defend how it had been found. When the criticism came, I had no public standing to answer it. That's why the contract language mattered. That's why visibility matters. Credit isn't vanity when erasure determines who carries the doubt." He looked back at his mother's handwriting. "I understand. Understanding tonight is easier than understanding in a room that can punish you." Julian accepted the statement without defending himself. At the bottom of the page, a transaction approval code referred to a restricted file stored in the board archive. They photographed every relevant page under dual access. Lumi placed the ledger in a numbered evidence sleeve. The answer waited one floor above them. On Sunday morning, the approval code matched a signed instruction from Julian's father. The original provenance line named the displaced family. A later version replaced it with the phrase "private European collection, acquired before the war." Julian stood at the boardroom window while Lumi finished explaining the evidentiary chain to Celia, Mara, and Theo. The physical details match the wartime inventory photograph and Mrs. Vale's contemporaneous ledger, Lumi said. The transaction instruction establishes an intentional internal revision. This supports withdrawal and independent investigation. It does not yet support a complete public allegation against every person involved. Celia's face had lost color. "The centennial sale opens tonight. The portrait cannot be offered," Mara said. "The estate will withdraw the remaining collection." Julian turned from the window. "Then they withdraw it." Celia looked at him. "You will damage 80 employees because your father may have concealed a record decades ago?" "No. I will withdraw one object because current evidence makes the catalog indefensible. And when the estate claims your judgment was compromised by an outside consultant who has spent 3 days alone with you?" Lumi felt the sentence land before anyone spoke. Julian's gaze flicked toward her. He refused to reverse the withdrawal. He did not challenge the assumption beneath Celia's warning. The portrait was formally removed from the auction at 11:23. After the meeting, Lumi entered the service elevator with Julian. The doors closed on the noise of staff rebuilding the evening program. He loosened his tie. "The estate has already pulled 6 additional lots," he said. "The board may ask for my resignation." "You made the correct decision." "That sounds less comforting than I imagined." "It wasn't meant as comfort." A faint smile touched his mouth and disappeared. "I know this decision doesn't entitle me to anything from you," he said. "No, it doesn't." His eyes rested on her face. "May I kiss you?" The directness sent a quiet current through her. Lumi studied him long enough to make certain the answer belonged to desire rather than gratitude, relief, or the intensity of the crisis. Yes. Julian stepped closer. The kiss was careful at first, his hand resting lightly against the elevator rail rather than her body. Lumi touched the lapel of his charcoal suit and felt his control shift, not vanish. He waited for every change in pressure she gave him. When she drew back, he did not follow. "The crisis is unfinished," she said. "I know. And doing the necessary thing does not buy intimacy." "I know that too." The elevator opened. Celia waited beyond the doors with a revised gala schedule in her hand. She did not look surprised to find them standing close. By late afternoon, the auction house and adjoining hotel were moving with the polished panic of a major event rebuilt in hours. Lumi changed in a staff dressing room. Her burgundy silk dress fell in clean lines beneath a fitted black coat, and she fastened the same low gold earrings she had worn to earlier professional openings. Her hair was pinned loosely at the back, waves framing her face. She expected to attend as the independent expert whose findings had required the withdrawal. The printed program had originally listed her beneath the restitution announcement. The revised version credited Vale and Rowe's technical review team. Lumi read it once. A gala assistant avoided her eyes. Mrs. Vale approved the final language. "Where is Julian?" "Sound check." In the ballroom, technicians clipped a primary microphone near Julian's bow tie and tested a backup transmitter beneath his left lapel. He stood beneath the centennial seal while Celia handed him a revised statement. "You cannot name her tonight," Celia said. "The rumors have already begun. She is not responsible for the rumors. That will not matter if the estate argues she influenced your decision through a private relationship. The evidence predates any relationship. Then preserve the evidence. Do not invite questions we are not legally ready to answer." Julian looked at the line crediting the technical team. "This is temporary," Celia said. "Restore her name when the filing is secure." He knew what Lumi had told him in the archive. He knew why the wording mattered. He accepted the revised statement anyway. Security received instructions to keep Lumi backstage until after the announcement. At the ballroom entrance, a guard stepped into her path. "I'm sorry, Miss Hart. You've been asked to wait in the service area. I have a written invitation. I was given Mr. Vale's authorization." Lumi looked through the open doors. Julian stood near the stage, speaking with the sound technician. The room beyond him glowed with crystal, brass, and old money. She folded the altered program once. "Which way to backstage?" The guard pointed toward the service corridor. Julian had just left the ballroom when Lumi intercepted him. Rain hammered the hotel roof, and the narrow corridor trembled faintly with the orchestra's opening music. She pressed the program against his chest. "My name is gone." His jaw tightened. "Lumi. Security says I'm not permitted in the ballroom. Only until the announcement is complete." "You agreed to this?" "The preservation filing isn't final. If the estate frames the withdrawal as personal retaliation, they may challenge every step we took. We protected those steps with documentation. The public doesn't know that yet." "Then tell them the chronology." "I cannot disclose the family records before Mara confirms the release." "I didn't ask you to." He glanced toward the ballroom doors. An assistant signaled that he had less than a minute. Lumi lowered her voice. "I agreed to protect evidence. I did not agree to disappear. I'm trying to prevent them from using me against you. You stepped away from the camera in the archive. You let Celia remove my credit. Now security is treating me as a threat to a decision my work made possible. Announcing your role and whatever exists between us on the same night could destroy the case. No one required you to announce our private life. Julian's gaze fixed on hers. You could have named my work accurately, she said. You could have consulted me before turning me into someone who enters through service doors and waits out of sight. I want you, he said, the words almost severe in their restraint. That is the one fact I cannot control once this room knows it. They will use it against everything you found. Then stop pretending you don't want me. Lumi. She stepped closer. That isn't an answer. Julian held her gaze. He gave her time to retreat. She closed the remaining distance. The kiss was nothing like the one in the elevator. That had been a beginning carefully chosen. This carried anger, desire, and the painful demand that he become honest before returning to the room that had erased her. His hand rose to her coat collar and stopped there. Lumi pressed her fingers against his lapel, directly over the hidden transmitter. Neither of them noticed the small green light. Inside the ballroom, 400 guests heard her challenge, Julian's breath, and the silence that followed. A staff member appeared at the corridor turn, face drained of color. The backup microphone, she said. It's live. Julian stepped back. Through the wall came the low disturbance of hundreds of people reacting at once. A technician ran forward and disconnected the transmitter, but the moment had already crossed every boundary Julian had tried to control. The ballroom doors opened. Reporters were standing. Celia reached Julian first. You must go on stage now. He looked at Lumi. She held the altered program at her side. Tell the truth, she said. Julian walked into the ballroom alone. Lumi remained at the backstage threshold, close enough to see him reach the rostrum beneath the Vale Rowe centennial emblem. The first question came before he could begin the prepared statement. Mr. Vale, was the portrait withdrawn because of your relationship with the outside consultant? Celia stood beside the stage, one hand closed around the approved remarks. Julian adjusted the primary microphone. The portrait was withdrawn because new physical and documentary evidence requires independent review, he said. Was the consultant given unusual access because of a personal relationship? She was retained under an independent technical agreement. Did the relationship begin before the findings? Julian knew the answer. Lumi's photographs, measurements, and contract all predated their first kiss. He also knew that answering honestly would confirm the broadcast and invite questions about every private hour they had worked together. There is no personal matter relevant to the withdrawal, he said. The sentence was precise enough for a lawyer and destructive enough for everyone else. A reporter near the front raised her voice. Then what did we just hear? Julian's expression did not change. An external technical consultant and I had a private exchange that has no bearing on the evidence. External technical consultant. Lumi felt the words strip away the nights in the archive, the wrong crate, the conservation seal, and the report waiting under her name. Another reporter called out, did Ms. Hart's access exceed standard procedure? All access was governed by internal controls. He did not mention her independent agreement. He did not say she had stopped the portrait from being altered. He did not state that the personal relationship had begun only after her evidence was documented. Around the ballroom, people began building the story from what he refused to clarify. A concealed consultant. A private relationship. A valuable lot withdrawn after days of hidden access. Lumi waited one final moment. Julian looked toward the backstage entrance. She was no longer there. In a service office below the ballroom, Lumi opened her laptop and initiated the transfer procedure specified in her contract. Her complete technical report went first to Mara. The seal photographs, crate measurements, archive citations, access logs, and comparative images followed. A duplicate package went to the independent review panel Mara had designated. Theo entered while the final files uploaded. I can witness chain of custody, he said. Please. He watched her verify the file hashes and sign the transfer record. Mara called as soon as the package arrived. I have everything. The panel has confirmed receipt. The originals? Preservation order covers them. We can proceed without access controlled by Vale Rowe. Good. Lumi ended the call and removed the restricted archive card from her bag. Julian found her before she reached the security desk. His bow tie was gone. Rain-darkened light from the loading bay cut across his face. You left before I could explain. I heard the explanation. The statement was meant to protect the case. You protected the evidence by letting the room question the expert. I can correct the personal misunderstanding after Mara confirms the filing. Lumi looked directly at him. Confidentiality was our obligation, she said. Invisibility was your choice. His face tightened. I never meant to diminish your work. You removed my name, kept me from the room, and described me as a technical consultant after my report forced the withdrawal. I was trying to control the damage. You did. You decided which person the damage could reach. He stepped closer, then stopped before entering her space. Give me until morning. No. Lumi. You keep asking for time as if delay has no cost. Tonight, the cost was my credibility. She placed the key card on the desk. Under the termination clause, my contract ends upon transfer of the completed report. Theo witnessed receipt. Julian glanced at the card. You don't have to leave the case. The case is with people who no longer require me to enter through a side door. I'll arrange a car. No. It's pouring. I know. She pulled on her fitted black coat. Burgundy silk remained visible below the hem. I won't let another concealed arrangement become the final image of this night. Lumi walked down the service corridor and out into the rain. Julian did not follow her. Near midnight, the board gathered in a hotel suite above the ballroom. The statement they prepared attributed the gala confusion to procedural irregularities involving an unnamed outside consultant. It promised a careful internal review and reaffirmed confidence in Vale Rowe's leadership. Celia placed it in front of Julian. This protects the staff, she said. It preserves the restitution department you built and gives us time to separate the firm from her actions. Theo stood near the door, holding the original chain of custody logs. Julian read the statement once. The unnamed consultant would be recognizable to every reporter who had heard the broadcast. Lumi's name would remain absent, while the doubt attached itself to her. He thought of his mother's ledger. He thought of an institution preserving itself by allowing a less powerful woman to carry visible blame. No, he said. Celia's expression hardened. You are responsible for 80 employees. Yes. Then act like it. Julian tore the statement in half. I am. He ordered the restricted records preserved under independent control. He suspended the centennial sale rather than replacing the withdrawn portrait with other headline lots. He instructed Theo to deliver the original logs directly to Mara and the commission. A board member warned that clients would leave. Julian answered, then they leave with accurate information. Celia stared at him. And Lumi returns because you make a dramatic sacrifice? I don't know whether she will ever speak to me again. Then why destroy your position? Because my position is what I used to make the wrong choice. He did not call Lumi. He did not ask Mara to tell her what he was doing. He did not turn accountability into a message designed to draw her back. Before dawn, Julian stood alone at the ballroom rostrum. He removed the approved statement. On a blank page, he wrote Lumi Hart's name first. Monday morning, the ballroom held fewer flowers and more cameras. Julian wore the previous evening's white shirt beneath a dark suit. He had not slept, but his posture remained composed when he approached the microphone. Celia sat with the board. Mara stood beside Theo near the aisle. Lumi was not present. Julian began without defending the accidental broadcast. Yesterday, Vale Rowe withdrew the principal portrait from its centennial auction because evidence raised serious questions about its wartime ownership and our institution's handling of those questions. He looked directly toward the cameras. That review began with Lumi Hart, an independent paintings conservator and provenance researcher. Reporters shifted, pens moving. Ms. Hart identified an undocumented replacement backing board, altered fastenings, and material consistent with the claimant family's wartime inventory record. Her measurements later revealed that a transport crate authorized during a building inspection could not contain the portrait without disturbing that evidence. Behind him, a screen displayed no private images, only dates and documented actions. Ms. Hart stopped the movement, applied a numbered conservation seal, and created the chain of evidence that allowed claimant counsel to secure an emergency preservation order. He gave the chronology in exact sequence: Lumi's condition report, the independent agreement, the photographs, the crate incident, the ledger comparison, and the formal withdrawal. All of those findings were documented before any personal relationship began between Miss Hart and me. The room became very still. A personal relationship later developed. I attempted to conceal that fact because I believed controlling its timing would protect the investigation and protect Ms. Hart. Instead, I removed her credit, restricted her access to a public announcement of her own work, and allowed her integrity to be questioned. He did not look toward Celia. Those decisions were mine. Ms. Hart did not approve them, benefit from them, or consent to being represented as an unnamed member of an internal team. A reporter raised a hand, but Julian continued. My late mother's sealed ledger and the restricted Vale family provenance records have been transferred to an independent restitution commission and to counsel for the claimant family. The records include evidence that my father authorized the removal of identifying provenance information from the portrait's internal file. A murmur passed through the ballroom. The commission will determine the full historical and legal consequences. The Vale family will not control that process. Julian placed both hands on the rostrum. Effective today, I resign as managing director of Vale Rowe. I am also suspending my family voting authority for the duration of the investigation. The centennial sale remains suspended. Questions erupted. Had the estate threatened legal action? Would the firm survive? Was he admitting fraud? Did he expect Lumi to return? Julian answered only what he could support. When someone asked whether the disclosure was intended to repair his relationship with her, he said, Ms. Hart owes me no response. This statement is owed to the truth and to the people whose work and history I allowed to remain hidden. He left the rostrum without asking for sympathy. For weeks passed before Lumi agreed to see him. She spent those weeks in an independent conservation studio near Boston's Museum District, working beneath broad north-facing windows while temperatures fell and the last autumn rain hardened into silver along the curbs. She did not rely on Julian's speech. Mara confirmed that the commission controlled the original records. The claimant family had received complete copies. Lumi's authorship appeared on the public technical summary. Vale Rowe had not attempted to condition archive access on silence, settlement, or revised language. Theo confirmed that Julian's voting suspension remained in effect. Only then did Lumi agree to a brief conversation. Julian arrived at the studio alone. No assistant waited outside. He carried no flowers, gift, or envelope. His charcoal overcoat was plain, and without the authority of a rostrum or auction room around him, he looked more tired than she remembered. Lumi wore a cream sweater and dark trousers. She remained standing beside the work table. Thank you for meeting me, he said. You have 20 minutes. He nodded. I resigned. My voting authority is suspended. The archive is under commission control, and the board cannot retrieve the records without independent approval. I know. A faint change crossed his face. Of course she verified it. I needed to know whether the behavior continued after the cameras left. That was reasonable. He did not try to fill the silence. Lumi studied him. Why did you release the ledger? Because it did not belong to me as a private instrument anymore. My mother recorded evidence that affected another family's history. And if the commission permanently removes the Vale family from control of the auction house? The records still belong with the people entitled to see them. What happens to my credit if the firm collapses? It remains yours. The public report, the commission archive, and the exhibition materials identify your authorship independently of Vale and Rowe. She watched his eyes as he answered. No evasion. No appeal to what he had lost. Julian rested his hands loosely at his sides. I used protection as a respectable word for fear. I told myself I was shielding people from consequences when I was deciding who had to bear them. You repeated what happened to your mother. Yes. And you did it after I told you what erasure had already cost me. Yes. The second admission hurt more because he did not soften it. I'm not asking you to forgive me because I resigned, he continued. I'm not asking you to return to the firm. I don't know what permanent change looks like after 4 weeks, and I won't pretend one public statement proves it. What are you asking? For the chance to speak to you without secrecy or authority between us. Nothing more than you choose. Lumi walked to the window. On the pavement below, people moved beneath a pale winter sky. She remembered the service corridor, the altered program, and the instant Julian had chosen process language while the room rewrote her work as private influence. She also remembered the empty space he had left after the press briefing. No private campaign, no pressure through Mara, no attempt to make his sacrifice her responsibility. She turned back. If we see each other again, it will be openly. Yes. I will not work for you or through your family. I would not ask you to. You will not use confidentiality to make decisions about my visibility. No. And when you are afraid, you tell me before you build a structure around that fear and call it protection. Julian met her gaze. I will. Lumi believed that he meant it. Meaning it was not the same as proving it. Still, proof could only begin after a decision allowed time to continue. We can have dinner, she said. Once. Relief moved through his face, restrained but real. Openly, he said. Openly. Outside the studio, Julian paused beside the curb. He offered his hand but did not step closer. Lumi looked at it. Then she looked at him. Not yet. His hand lowered without protest. The restitution exhibition opens next week, she said. We'll arrive separately. All right. She walked away knowing the final choice remained hers. 5 weeks after the gala, rain began turning to Boston's first light snow. Vale and Rowe's bronze front doors stood open beneath the carved stone facade. Through the glass above them, Lumi could see the independent restitution exhibition panel illuminated in the entrance hall. Technical Conservation and Provenance Analysis, Lumi Hart. Her full name was visible before anyone entered the gallery. Lumi stood across the street in a structured burgundy wool coat, the same low gold earrings she had worn on the night her credit disappeared. She carried her black gloves rather than wearing them. Snow caught in the waves of her chestnut hair. The side service door remained closed. Mara had confirmed the final labels that afternoon. Theo had sent photographs of the installed conservation seals and chronology. The claimant family had approved the exhibition of the portrait's reverse and wartime documentation while ownership proceedings continued. Nothing depended on Julian's private promise. He waited near the front steps. He wore a simple charcoal overcoat, without ceremonial tailoring or any sign of his former office. He had arrived before her but remained outside rather than positioning himself in the entrance hall where he could control the encounter. Guests passed between them and the bronze doors. Julian did not raise a hand to summon her. He did not move into her path. Lumi crossed the street. When she reached the foot of the steps, she looked past him once more at the credit panel. Her name stood above the entrance, attached to the work she had done and visible to every person entering the institution. Julian followed her gaze. They moved it higher, he said. Theo said the first placement was difficult to read from outside. A quiet smile touched her mouth. He was right. Snow settled on Julian's dark shoulders. He waited. Lumi studied the man in front of her. No longer the director who believed every truth became safer inside his timing, not yet someone whose future choices could be guaranteed, but a man who had surrendered control before knowing whether she would return. She had not come to reward him. She had come because her work, her independence, and the claimant family's evidence were secure without requiring her silence. She had come because Julian's accountability had continued when romance offered him no certainty. She had come because desire no longer had to enter through a side door. Lumi held out her hand. The surprise in Julian's eyes lasted only a second. He accepted without pulling her toward him, his fingers closing warmly around hers. Together they climbed the steps. They passed beneath Lumi's restored credit and through the bronze front doors while the service entrance remained shut behind the building. The first snow caught in the burgundy sleeve joined to Julian's hand.